On September 2, 1945, World War II officially came to an end, just weeks after the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. America believed these bombs made them untouchable, the king of the world. But they were wrong, because those explosions didn't just end a war, they started a new race. A race to unlock the most dangerous technology ever created. And over the decades that followed, 9 other countries cracked the code. Some copied, some stole, some built it in silence, in deep underground facilities or far out in the desert, and some never built it at all. This is the story of how every nuclear nation got its bomb, and we'll also look at the countries that came dangerously close, and the ones that might be next. The story actually begins in Germany, because before the United States ever built a bomb, the science came from somewhere else. In 1938, 2 German physicists, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, discovered nuclear fission, the process of splitting an atom to release large amounts of energy. It was theoretical at first, but terrifying in its potential. This discovery set off alarms all around the world, especially in the US, where scientists like Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard realized what it actually meant, that Nazi Germany might be able to build the bomb first. So America launched the Manhattan Project, a top-secret research program with over 130,000 people working across the country. And the man chosen to lead it was Robert Oppenheimer. He brought together the greatest minds in physics to beat the Nazis. After years of testing came the first detonation, the Trinity test. The United States had just built the world's first atomic bomb. And within weeks, the world saw what that power really meant. In August 1945, America dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, ending World War II and changing modern warfare forever. But the US wasn't the only one watching. In a hidden bunker outside Moscow, Soviet spies were already feeding Manhattan Project blueprints to Stalin, piece by piece, diagram by diagram. Because the nuclear arms race had already begun, and the enemy wasn't years behind. It was already inside the room. Just 4 years after Hiroshima, the US lost its nuclear monopoly, because on August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb, codenamed First Lightning. But this bomb wasn't built from scratch. You see, while America had Oppenheimer and open research, the Soviets had spies. Deep inside the Manhattan Project, agents like Klaus Fuchs and Theodore Hall quietly passed critical equations, implosion designs, and classified data to Moscow, allowing the Soviets to fast-track their bomb. The project was given to Lavrenti Beria, the feared head of the secret police. Under his brutal watch, Soviet physicists worked in total secrecy, often under surveillance and sometimes even under threat. The bomb was built at a remote site in Kazakhstan, and when they tested it, the explosion was almost identical to America's. While the US and Soviets were racing ahead, another powerful country was quietly preparing to join the club, Britain. Because although they weren't the first to detonate a bomb, British scientists had helped invent it. Physicists like Rudolf Piles and Otto Frisch were among the earliest to describe how nuclear fission could become a weapon. And during the war, Britain even had its own bomb program, Tube Alloys, before merging efforts with the US in the Manhattan Project. But after the war, America shut the door. The McMahon Act of 1946 banned sharing nuclear secrets, even with allies. So Britain went solo. They built secret testing grounds in Australia, and in 1952, just 3 years after the Soviets, they successfully detonated their first atomic bomb. It was called Operation Hurricane, and it proved one thing: Britain wouldn't rely on anyone for defense. Now, the bomb wasn't just in the hands of superpowers. It was becoming a tool of national survival, and that realization would soon reach France. By the late 1950s, France was a major military power, with colonies around the world, a seat at the United Nations, and ties to other nations through the NATO alliance. But it didn't have the bomb. And after the Suez Crisis in 1956, it learned a harsh truth. Without nukes, France couldn't act alone. The United States and Britain backed down under pressure, and France didn't want to rely on either of them again. So, under President Charles de Gaulle, France launched its own nuclear program. They set up secret test facilities in the Algerian desert, and by 1960, they were ready. The test was called Gibois Bleu, and when it exploded, it was far more powerful than anyone expected, even stronger than the Hiroshima bomb. France had done it. It became the fourth nuclear nation, and the first to go fully solo. Because to France, the bomb wasn't just about war, it was about sovereignty, and this same logic would soon reach a very different and distant country. In the early 1960s, China was surrounded. To the east, American warships. To the north, the Soviet Union. And in between, a growing sense that China wasn't truly safe. China's chairman, Mao Zedong, believed the only way to survive was to become untouchable, and that meant having the bomb. At first, the Soviets helped. They gave China blueprints, trained engineers, and even sent a mock-up warhead. But after the Sino-Soviet split in 1959, all that support vanished. The USSR pulled out their scientists, and the partnership collapsed. But Mao didn't stop. China moved the entire program inland to Lac Nord, far from foreign eyes. And in complete secrecy, Chinese scientists, some of whom had studied in the West, kept building. On October 16, 1964, they detonated China's first atomic bomb. It was codenamed 596, a quiet nod to the year the Soviets walked away. With that explosion, China became the fifth nuclear power, and more importantly, the first non-Western country to build it fully alone after being abandoned. And from here, the race would go underground, because the next country to get the bomb didn't even exist before World War II. Israel. Israel has never admitted to having nuclear weapons, but almost everyone believes they do. And to understand how they got them, you have to go back to the 1950s, when the memory of the Holocaust was still fresh, and the new state of Israel felt constantly under threat. Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion believed that survival meant strength, so he made a decision. Israel would build a nuclear weapon, not to use, but to ensure it never had to. But Israel didn't have the technology, so it turned to France. After the Suez Crisis in 1956, the two countries secretly aligned. France agreed to help Israel build a research reactor in the Negev desert, near a remote town called Dimona. What they built wasn't just a reactor, it was a full underground facility with plutonium extraction, high-security labs, and hidden bunkers. Even American satellites were fooled at first. By the late 1960s, US intelligence believed Israel had enough material for 1 to 2 bombs. But when President Nixon asked them to clarify, Israel followed a strict policy. We will not be the first to introduce nuclear weapons into the Middle East. They never tested a bomb, never officially confirmed it, but behind the scenes, they built an arsenal. Today, it's estimated Israel has 80 to 90 warheads, and no one really knows how many more. But just as Israel was mastering secrecy, another country was learning how to break the rules, with help from the very nations trying to stop it: India. In 1974, India shocked the world. They conducted their first nuclear test in the deserts of Rajasthan and gave it a name no one expected: Smiling Buddha. Officially, it was a peaceful nuclear explosion. Unofficially, it marked India's entry into the nuclear club. But to understand how they got there, you have to rewind 2 decades. After independence in 1947, India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, believed in science and self-reliance. He wanted India to develop nuclear energy, but insisted it would never be used for weapons. That changed after two things: China's nuclear test in 1964 and India's war with Pakistan in 1971. India now felt surrounded and vulnerable, so they made the decision to develop the bomb. But here's the twist: much of the technology came from Canada and the United States, who had helped India build a civilian nuclear reactor. India then used that infrastructure to secretly extract plutonium for weapons. And when the ground shook in Rajasthan, the world realized India had just joined the nuclear club. But India didn't stop there. After another round of nuclear tension with Pakistan, India tested again in 1998, this time with no pretense of peace. They detonated 5 nuclear devices and declared themselves a nuclear state. The world condemned it, but the message was clear: India would no longer depend on anyone else for its security. And just 2 weeks later, the country next door answered with its own explosion. Pakistan had always felt surrounded: a hostile neighbor in the east, a volatile Afghanistan in the west, and pressure from the West to never go nuclear. But after India's first test in 1974, Pakistan saw it as an existential threat. So Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto made a promise: we will eat grass, but we will build the bomb. And the man who made that happen was Abdul Qadir Khan, a brilliant metallurgist who worked in Europe's nuclear labs and quietly stole their secrets. He brought centrifuge designs back to Pakistan, where scientists began enriching uranium in secret facilities. By the late 1980s, Pakistan had a working bomb. But they waited until May 1998 when India tested again. And just 2 weeks later, Pakistan detonated 6 nuclear devices deep under the Chagai Hills. Pakistan was now the world's 7th nuclear power. But A.Q. Khan didn't stop there. Behind closed doors, he built something far more dangerous than a weapon. He built a network, a secret global black market for nuclear technology. Blueprints, centrifuges, uranium enrichment designs, all for sale to anyone willing to pay. Libya, Iran, North Korea, all of them got help through Khan's underground network. He used middlemen, forged documents, front companies, moving parts through Malaysia, Dubai, and Europe. And for years, no one noticed. Until 2003, when Libya came clean. They admitted they bought bomb designs, and they didn't come from Russia or China. They came from Pakistan. That's when the world realized A.Q. Khan had become the world's most dangerous nuclear dealer. And while Pakistan placed him under house arrest, he was never tried. Because for the government, he was still a national hero, the man who gave them the bomb. But the damage was already done. Nuclear knowledge was no longer locked in bunkers or government labs. It was in suitcases, on CDs, crossing borders. And the nuclear club was about to grow again. Ever since the Korean War, the Kim regime believed one thing: without nuclear weapons, the country would never be safe. So it all started in the 1980s. North Korea had signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, promising not to build weapons. In exchange, they received help building a nuclear energy program, including a research reactor at Yongbyon. But as US intelligence began watching the site more closely, something didn't add up. Satellite images showed more than just a reactor. They spotted cooling towers, reprocessing labs, even underground tunnels. And in 2002, North Korea was caught conducting secret uranium enrichment, violating their treaty. So they pulled out. They kicked out inspectors, and they raced to finish the bomb. By 2006, they were ready. North Korea detonated their first nuclear device in a tunnel beneath a mountain, becoming the 8th country in the world to do so. The test was small, the explosion was weak, but it worked. In the years since, they've conducted at least 5 more tests, each one stronger than the last. And today, estimates suggest they may have over 40 warheads. Small, crude, but portable. Enough to change any negotiation or start a war. Because with North Korea, the bomb isn't just a weapon. It's their insurance policy for survival. But while most countries raced to build the bomb, one country did the opposite. South Africa. In the late 1970s, South Africa was isolated, ruled by an apartheid regime and facing pressure from all sides. The Cold War was heating up in Africa, and Cuban forces were active in nearby Angola. Fearing encirclement, the South African government made a quiet decision: build a nuclear weapon. They didn't test in public. They didn't announce it. Instead, they started producing highly enriched uranium in secret, with help from international partners like Israel and West Germany. By the 1980s, South Africa had built 6 nuclear warheads, and a 7th was underway. These bombs weren't built for battle. They were built as a bargaining chip, a silent warning. But then, the Cold War ended, and as apartheid began to fall, the new South African leadership made a historic decision. In 1989, President F.W. de Klerk ordered the total dismantling of the program. Warheads were disassembled, facilities shut down, and in 1991, South Africa joined the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, becoming the only nation in history to voluntarily give up nuclear weapons it had already built. But there were countries that came close to building the bomb and failed, like Iraq, whose secret weapons program under Saddam Hussein was destroyed after the Gulf War, or Libya, who bought bomb designs from A.Q. Khan, then gave them up before building anything, or Syria, whose suspected reactor was destroyed in a 2007 Israeli airstrike before it could be completed. Even Argentina, Brazil, South Korea, and Taiwan once explored nuclear weapons, but backed away under pressure or internal change. Because by now, the world had learned getting the bomb was risky, but being caught trying could be even worse. And that brings us to today, because there are countries now that aren't nuclear powers, but could become one. Iran has long claimed it only wants peaceful nuclear energy, but its enrichment levels, centrifuge sites, and missile programs say otherwise. And some fear it's only a matter of time.